My husband cheated on me with his coworker for months, but when I discovered their affair at his boss's New Year's party, I exposed them in front of the entire company and left them jobless, divorced, and homeless. I'm 36 years old. I work in an office doing basically the same thing for like 8 years now, and I need to tell this story because honestly, I still can't believe all of this actually happened. My marriage to Kevin had been going on for 10 years, and I'm not going to lie, the last 5 were horrible. Like we were living as roommates who barely tolerated each other. You know, that awkward situation where you share space but not a life. We tried to have kids for years, went through the whole IVF process 3 times, spent a fortune we didn't have, and nothing worked. And I guess that finished breaking us because after each failed attempt, he pulled away more and more, and I just stayed there waiting for things to magically get better, which obviously never happened. Kevin was 37 when everything exploded. He'd been working at the same company for like 7 years, something related to marketing or sales. I never really understood what he did exactly, because when I asked him about his day, he always gave me vague answers like, same old, or nothing interesting. The thing is that for like 6 months, I'd noticed he was coming home later, spending more time on his phone, smiling with that goofy smile he hadn't given me in years, and part of me knew it. You know what I mean? That feeling in your stomach that tells you something's wrong, but you prefer to ignore it because facing it means admitting your life is a mess. One day in October, I think, or maybe November, I don't remember exactly, I saw some messages on his phone when he left it on the kitchen table to go to the bathroom, and they were with someone named Natalie. Super flirty messages like, I miss seeing you and you're the best part of my day. That kind of stuff that turns your stomach. And when I asked him about it, he said she was just a coworker and I was overreacting, that it was his sense of humor and I didn't understand modern workplace dynamics, which made me feel like a crazy paranoid person. So I dropped it, even though inside I felt like something didn't add up at all. Weeks went by and things stayed just as tense at home. He'd come home late. I'd go to sleep early to avoid having to talk to him. Weekends, we each did our own thing separately. Basically, we were 2 strangers sharing a house and a bank account. December came around and his boss, Steven, announced he was throwing a New Year's Eve party at his mansion. Yes, literally a mansion because the guy was super rich. And Kevin told me we had to go because it was important for his career, that all the employees were going with their partners and it would look bad if we didn't show up. Truth is, I didn't want to go. Not at all. But I thought maybe it would be good to get out of the routine, do something different. And besides, I was curious to meet this famous Natalie and see with my own eyes who the woman sending little messages to my husband was. The night of December 31st, we got ready in silence. He put on a suit I didn't recognize, obviously new. And I put on a black dress I'd had stored away for years, and we drove off without talking much, just superficial comments about traffic or the weather. Steven's house was impressive, like those mansions you see in movies with huge gardens, a fountain at the entrance, lights everywhere, waiters serving champagne on silver trays, all very elegant and ostentatious. There were like 50 people there, company employees with their partners, some with kids, though most left their kids with babysitters because the party was going to last until late. Kevin separated from me as soon as we entered, said he had to greet some colleagues, and I stood there with a glass of champagne feeling completely out of place. I was alone for like half an hour, pretending to check my phone so I wouldn't look so pathetic, when a guy approached me and said, "Hi, I'm Paul. I think we went to the same high school like 1,000 years ago," and I looked at him and honestly didn't remember him at all, but I played along because I needed someone to talk to. Paul was 35, friendly. We started chatting about life, work, typical party conversations, and at some point he mentioned that his wife also worked at Kevin's company, that her name was Natalie, and there I felt like a click in my head, like an alarm going off. And I asked him casually if she was at the party and he said yes, that a while ago he'd seen her around but she was also socializing with her coworkers. We kept talking, and as time went on, we realized something weird. Neither Kevin nor Natalie had come back to where we were. We'd been at the party for like an hour, and I hadn't seen my husband since we entered, and Paul hadn't seen his wife either. It was like 11 at night when Paul suggested we go look for them, and I said yes, even though inside I already knew what we were going to find. That horrible feeling that you're about to confirm your worst suspicions. We walked through the house, which was gigantic. There were like 3 different living rooms, a huge dining room, a terrace, a backyard with an illuminated pool, and finally we saw them there, in a corner of the garden, half hidden behind some bushes, Kevin and a blonde woman I assumed was Natalie. She was like 29, according to what I found out later, and they were standing there very close to each other, laughing. And at one point, she leaned in and gave Kevin a kiss on the cheek. It wasn't a casual friend's kiss. It was a kiss with intention, with affection, with intimacy, and he didn't pull away. On the contrary, he smiled at her with that smile. I knew perfectly because once upon a time, it was for me. Paul and I stood there watching them like idiots, not knowing what to do. And I felt a horrible mix of emotions: rage, sadness, humiliation, but above all, a cold clarity that my marriage had officially ended in that moment. Paul was just as shocked as I was. He looked pale even in the dim light of the garden. And he told me, in a low voice, "We have to do something. We can't let them get away with this." And I agreed, but didn't know what to do exactly. We moved away before they saw us and sat in some chairs near the pool to plan. I know. It sounds weird, but in that moment we were both so angry that we needed revenge. We needed them to feel at least a little bit of the humiliation we were feeling. Paul had an idea. He told me that Steven, the boss, had planned a fireworks show for midnight that would be seen from the backyard, and that he was going to have all the guests gather there to watch them. The thing is, there was a room with huge windows that opened directly onto the garden, and if we opened the curtains at exactly the right moment, all the guests would see Kevin and Natalie out there, probably kissing or doing something worse. It was risky. Could go wrong. But honestly, in that moment, I didn't care about anything. I just wanted Kevin to feel shame, for his boss to see him, for HR to see him, for everyone to know what kind of person he was. We coordinated everything quickly. Paul talked to Steven and told him it would be a better idea to watch the fireworks from inside because of the cold, asked if they could open the curtains in the main room. Steven didn't suspect anything and agreed. I made sure Kevin and Natalie stayed in the garden. I saw them a couple more times during the next hour, each time closer to each other, each time more obvious what was happening between them. 10 minutes to midnight, when everyone started gathering in the main room, there were like 40 people there, champagne glasses in hand, ready for the toast, and I was standing near the curtains with my heart beating a mile a minute, wondering if we were really going to do this, if I was really going to destroy Kevin's life in such a public way. The countdown started. 10, 9, 8, and I looked at Paul, who was on the other side of the room, and he gave me a nod, like, it's now or never. And when they got to 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year. Paul and I pulled the curtains at the same time, and there were Kevin and Natalie kissing. Not an innocent kiss, but a real kiss, passionate, with his hands on her waist and her hands on his neck, perfectly illuminated by the garden lights like they were on a stage. The silence in the room was instant. Everyone stopped shouting Happy New Year and stood there staring out the windows, some with their mouths open, others whispering, and I saw Steven's face, the boss, which went from confusion to anger in seconds. And I also saw the HR woman, Sandra, I think her name was, who immediately took out her phone and started taking pictures. Kevin and Natalie realized something was happening when they heard the murmurs. They turned toward the house and saw everyone watching them through the windows. And the expression on their faces was pure terror. Like that moment in movies when the villain realizes they've been caught. Natalie jumped away from Kevin and covered her face with her hands, and Kevin just stood there like an idiot, looking inside, searching for me with his eyes among the crowd. And when our eyes met, I saw something on his face I'd never seen before. Real fear, panic that his life had just changed forever. The two of them ran out of the garden, literally running as if that would erase what everyone had just seen, and they didn't come back to the party. I heard later that Natalie left in her own car and Kevin in his. They didn't even leave together after all that drama. The party continued, but obviously everyone was talking about what had happened. It was the gossip of the century, the perfect scandal to start the new year. Steven was furious. I heard him tell Sandra that this was completely inappropriate, and there would be consequences on Monday when everyone returned to the office. Paul and I stayed at the party until like 2 in the morning. I don't know why. I guess neither of us wanted to go home and face the reality of what had just happened, so we stayed there drinking champagne and talking about our respective failed marriages, discovering we had a lot in common besides cheating spouses. Kevin called me the next day, January 1st, around 9 in the morning. I had a terrible hangover and could barely think, and he started yelling at me on the phone, saying how dare I humiliate him like that I'd ruined his career, that Steven was considering firing him, that it was all my fault for being a bitter and jealous wife. He didn't say I'm sorry even once. Didn't try to explain or justify the cheating. He just attacked me for exposing him. As if I were the bad guy in the story for not staying quiet and letting him keep cheating on me in peace. I hung up on him in the middle of his speech and blocked his number because I didn't have the energy to listen to his complaints when he was the one who had destroyed our marriage, not me. The following Monday, I found out through some contacts that Kevin in 2012, Natalie had been fired. Both of them. Company policy about inappropriate relationships in the workplace or something like that. Basically, Steven didn't want the drama and decided to get rid of the problem by firing both of them. Natalie apparently cried in the office when they gave her the news. Kevin, according to what I heard, got aggressive and had to be escorted out of the building by security. Very professional of him. Paul also divorced Natalie, obviously. Like, he didn't fire her literally because she wasn't his employee, but he kicked her out of the house. She went to live with her parents, who had a big house on the outskirts of the city. I hired a lawyer that same week, the best divorce attorney I could find within my budget, and proceeded with the papers. Kevin was served like 2 weeks later. A guy came to the house we still technically shared, although I slept in the guest room with a lock on the door, and delivered the official documents to him. He came to my room that night, knocking softly on the door, with a repentant voice, saying we could fix things, to forgive him, that Natalie didn't mean anything, that it had been a mistake. All the cliché phrases that cheaters say when they realize the consequences of their actions. I told him no, through the door, to leave, that there was nothing left to fix, and I heard him stay there standing like 5 minutes in silence before finally leaving. Paul also started his divorce. We talked often in those weeks. We'd become friends by circumstance, united by the betrayal of our respective spouses. And he told me Natalie was devastated, that she was sending him messages all the time, begging him to forgive her, that it had been a mistake, that she loved Kevin but also loved Paul, a bunch of contradictions that didn't make sense. The funny thing, and I discovered this like a month after the New Year's incident, is that Kevin moved in with Natalie at her parents' house. Yes, you read that right? My husband went to live with his mistress at her parents' house, and while he was there living that awkward situation, he kept sending me messages, not from his blocked number but from unknown numbers or from emails, telling me not to proceed with the divorce, that he wanted to stay married to me, that he just needed time to sort things out. I found out about this whole situation through Paul, who found out from a mutual friend. And honestly, I couldn't believe Kevin's audacity, like he was literally living with the other woman while asking me not to divorce him. It was so absurd, it was almost funny. I decided to do something about it. I asked Paul for Natalie's number. He gave it to me without asking too many questions. And I called her one afternoon when I was sure Kevin wouldn't be around. Natalie answered with a nervous voice, probably thinking I was going to insult or threaten her. But I spoke to her calmly, told her we needed to talk about Kevin, that there were things she should know, and, surprisingly, she agreed to meet me at a cafe the next day. The meeting was strange, uncomfortable, the two of us sitting there with our coffees, avoiding eye contact at first. But after a few minutes we started talking, and I showed her the messages Kevin had been sending me, screenshots of emails where he told me he loved me, that he wanted to save our marriage, that Natalie was just a temporary distraction. I watched her go pale as she read, her hands trembling holding my phone, and she told me in a broken voice that Kevin had told her exactly the opposite, that he hated me, that I was a controlling witch, that he was just waiting for the right moment to officially leave me. I showed her more evidence, messages where he spoke badly of her to me, saying she was immature and needy, basically playing both of us, telling each of us what we wanted to hear to keep his options open. Natalie started crying there in the cafe, not those discreet cries but loud sobs, drawing attention from other people, and I just sat there not knowing what to do, because on one hand I felt a bit of pity for her. She was young, clearly in love, had lost her job and her marriage for this guy, but on the other hand she had actively participated in destroying my marriage, so my compassion had limits. I suggested she talk to Kevin that night, confront him with the information she'd just discovered, and she nodded through tears saying she would. I don't know exactly what happened that night at Natalie's parents' house, but Paul told me days later that Natalie's father, George, had found out about the whole situation, about Kevin's lies, about how he was manipulating his daughter, and kicked him out of the house immediately, literally told him he had half an hour to pack his things and get out. Kevin apparently tried to argue, say it was all a misunderstanding, but George didn't want to hear anything and threw him out. And Natalie didn't do anything to defend him, just stayed in her room crying. while her father kicked Kevin to the street. Kevin was left without a house, without a job, without a wife, without a mistress, basically with nothing, and started living couch to couch with friends who still had some patience for him. Like 2 weeks after George kicked him out, I received a long message from Kevin, like a complete essay, blaming me for absolutely everything that had happened to him, saying I'd destroyed his life out of revenge, that I was a horrible and bitter person, that I was going to regret not giving him another chance. It's a bunch of garbage I read once and then deleted without responding, because frankly I didn't care anymore what he thought or felt. The divorce was finalized like 4 months later, in May I think. It was relatively quick because we had no children or complicated properties to divide, just the house we had to sell and split the profits, and some credit card debts Kevin had accumulated without me knowing, another lovely discovery during the legal process. The day I signed the final papers, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, like finally free from that toxic relationship that had consumed me for years. And even though my life wasn't perfect by any means, at least it was mine again. I heard through the grapevine that Kevin eventually got another job, something much worse than what he had before, earning half as much, and that he's renting a small apartment in a bad area of the city. Natalie, according to Paul, went back to living with her parents and is trying to rebuild her life, looking for work, going to therapy, that whole post-disaster recovery process. Paul and I are still friends. We see each other every so often for coffee and to talk about life. And it's weird because our ex-spouses brought us together in the worst way possible, but in the end, something good came out of all that chaos. I'm 36 years old. I'm divorced. I live alone in an apartment I can barely afford, and my life is far from perfect. But at least it's honest, without lies or betrayals hidden in text messages. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. Exposing Kevin in such a public way. If I should have handled it more privately, more maturely. But then I remember his face when I confronted him after seeing the messages with Natalie months before the party, how he made me feel crazy and paranoid. And I think no, he deserved exactly what he got. Last week, Paul told me he saw Kevin at a supermarket, that he looked bad, tired, aged, and that when they crossed paths, Kevin just looked down and kept walking. I don't feel sorry for him. Truth is, I feel peace. And that's enough for now, I guess.